Hello internet friends. So this will be something a bit different for this channel. I would like to explore something that I keep seeing online when it comes to the kind of hobbyist indie development that I do. By that I mean people who make video games as a hobby, just for fun. Usually completely on their own or in very small groups of friends. Chances are if you're watching this that you are one of those people. Oh, and also I have no illusions that this video will change anyone's mind in any way, shape or form. But I just think it's an interesting topic to explore, so if you browse YouTube channels, Steam pages, forum posts or articles of people who make stuff with, lesser known engines, like say Leadworks 3D, the S2 engine, or maker software like RPG Maker, Game Guru, FPS Creator, or maybe you enjoy modding Source Engine games, or using the Creation Kit for Skyrim or Fallout, and so on. You will eventually come across a comment that goes something along the lines of, "This shows promise. Just think what you could do in Unreal Engine." Or, "Game Guru is really holding you back. Why don't you make this jump to Unity?" Or less friendly and constructive versions like, "RPG Maker fucking sucks, go make a real game in a real engine, kiddo." Now, these kinds of comments always kinda amazed me. And don't get me wrong, I fully understand them given how engines are promoted. The average gamer isn't necessarily aware how much work is involved in making a decent enough playable game, so from their perspective, say Unreal Engine currently has the most evolved graphics and produces some killer AAA titles. Why not use that? Why are you sitting there wasting your time with this stupid kid store FPS Creator, or RPG Maker, or Game Guru? Why make things so much harder for yourself coding everything from scratch in Leadworks or Godot when you could just jumpstart using a Unity template? Now, as someone who has been in the indie game scene for more than 15 years now, I have seen a lot of very talented people who made really fun mods or smaller maker type games take the plunge into other engines. And while some absolutely thrived, most of them never actually finished a game in a bigger engine. They start a project, you see a few videos, you see a few updates, and then they just go silent and quit game making altogether. Which I think is just unfortunate. And really sad sometimes to see people with a lot of talent go. But yeah, folks, move on. I think these comments generally come from two different outside perspectives that adopt the German and the American perspective. The quote-unquote German perspective assumes that using the best tools yields the best results. Now this is somewhat accurate on a surface level kind of viewing, but not necessarily true for every endeavor and every individual. Everyone can figure out a handsaw, but not everyone knows how to operate a chainsaw, to come up with a rather crude example. Using the best tools requires skills that hobbyists don't necessarily have and require time and discipline investment that isn't doable for everyone. The American perspective is a bit of a variant of the you can achieve anything you want in life if you just put your mind to it. Now how this worldview is still around and has the kind of longevity is a mystery to me, because that is just so obviously false. Sure, most of us are capable of way more than we might think, but we all have our own personal limits, be those physical or just simply intellectual. But to remain on topic, just because someone can make a decent game in Game Guru does not mean that said person can also pull it off in Unity, just because they put their mind to it. There are so many factors to consider that I made a little list. Now before I get into that, let me just point out that I personally like that there's still so much different tech being used, even if there are drawbacks. In my opinion, it ends up in many games feeling very different, and more diversity and variety in the stuff that is out there. An Unreal Engine game never feels quite like a source mod, for example. So, without further ado, here's the list. Point number 1 is the most important and I guess the most relevant one, and that is simply skill issue. Now this one is rather obvious, and I touched on it just now already. Just because someone can make a captivating RPG Maker game in RPG Maker does not mean that the same person could write such a game in Unity. Someone might be skilled enough to make atmospheric low-res art, write gripping dialogue, and weave a compelling plot, but that does not mean that said person is also capable to learn the technical knowledge to also program the underlying code themselves. The whole point of maker software, after all, is to allow non-coders and hobbyists to make their own stuff. And it just does not make sense to me that once you get good at it, people assume that you can also use a far more technical and professional tool. Also, the somewhat prejudiced perspective of the difference between artists and coders in game design is largely true. People skilled in one aspect are rarely skilled in the other, and vice versa. I, myself, am very comfortable with the art aspect of making games. So I feel confident that I can make compelling levels in CryEngine, for example, but I will never program any gameplay in such an engine. And no, templates, script pack, and blueprint packages are only half as decent as you might think. Sure, some of them are pretty, damn amazing, but if you want to make a game in Unreal Engine 5, you will have to make your own blueprints eventually. Most bigger engines require you to code at some point, even if you use something like Playmaker, which is still visual scripting, which is still scripting. Now, most of the hobbyists I'm referring to work on their own. And while there are some talented people that hammer out great game that even does relatively well on Steam, most of us cannot, and that is evident if you ever just browse the absolutely massive graveyard of dead projects on IndieDB and ModDB. I mean, sure, there are individuals who just make a fully featured 3D first-person shooter in Unreal Engine, and it's good enough to be sold on Steam. But those people are the extreme minority, and you can't expect every creator to have this level of discipline and skill. For me, for example, at the end of the day, it's either FPSC or GG games with their flaws and rough edges, or no game at all. Point number 2 is also pretty obvious, it's time constraints. A comment I've gotten a lot myself in the past when I was dabbling with bigger engine was, if you just keep at it, in a year or so, you will have a much better game than if you stick with Game Guru. And while that may have been true if I stuck with Unreal Engine 5 on a somewhat regular basis, the time investment is still too great for me personally. Now this issue and the skill issue can be resolved by working in teams, but this is A, not an option for all of us due to conflicting schedules, B, not something all of us want to do. Some of us are more introverted, not interested in managing a project with other people, and C, way harder than you might think. Especially when you're dealing with adults who have families, jobs and other responsibilities. I myself have been on a couple dev teams in the past and they all fell apart eventually. Now, sometimes these things work out and there's usually a financial incentive involved, or people are able to meet in real life and work together that way. Usually students or otherwise younger people. Now you may be able to make a cool modding creation kit with a full story and voice acted characters, some custom media and everything in half a year. Or maybe a creepy atmospheric horror shooter in FPS Creator in a month or two. But you will have to invest way more time if you start to use a pro-level engine. And that's just not realistic for many of us. Point number 3, the challenge. A talented coder might feel way more engaged getting stuff to work in LeadWork engine or script something complex in a simpler tool like Game Guru. I know someone, for example, who made a functional chess game in Game Guru, an engine designed to make simple FPS games at its core. I enjoyed the challenge of making something visually striking in notoriously ugly low-tech engines. Some of that magic is just lost if you use a big engine where all these things have been done before and are well documented to be replicated by everyone. Point number 4 is personal preference, or simply fun. You see, a friend of mine is working in Hammer Editor, and he thinks that it's therapeutic and relaxing. Another one likes to kick back, listen to music and make a few levels in Game Guru. I myself like to keep my hands busy while I listen to podcasts or lectures. You might enjoy doing 3D art and rely on pre-coded gameplay elements to make your game. You might just flat out have more fun using simple but limited tools than something complex where the sky's the limit. I've been talking to quite a few other developers who have projects in Unreal or Unity that also use underdog engines, and a common sentiment is that using Unreal Engine 5 just feels like work. And something feeling like work is the last thing I want to do when I come home from, work. And let's also add to that not every one of us aims for a commercial release on Steam. Point number 5 is community. You may have noticed that I keep bringing up the word hobbyists. That is because some people that stumble onto our work use a tone as if we are studios and they are the customers and entitled to things having a certain quality or play a certain way, and that's just not the case. But also, niche engines and tools often have a strong sense of community. You get to know the other users, and that is somewhat lacking when you use a huge engine like Unity, Unreal Engine, something like that. Now, I have been using Unity and Unreal Engine and met very helpful and nice people in the respective forums and discords. But in the end, most interaction are goal-oriented and the overall experience is very anonymous. My personal reason for not using Unreal Engine 5 engine more, after all, is a blend of all of the above. But here are the specifics. Number one, as I started to understand the blueprint system more and more, I kind of envisioned in my mind what needed to be done and how long it would take. And I kept adding years to my project, and I just know that I don't have the determination or discipline to see such a task through. You have to know yourself in that regard. Number two, I'm very particular about the weapons in my shooters. I expect decent gun sway, feedback, different reload animation, and that's just beyond my skill set in Unity or Unreal. Number three, I simply had no more fun. Putting up the engine and seeing what I was currently working on felt the same way like seeing the entrance to the store I used to work in when I was in retail. And I don't actually want to feel that way. If I were 18, I'd probably be able to make something small in Unity or Unreal Engine, but these days I just don't have that kind of spare time. I get a good session of working on my stuff in every 2 weeks. Twice a week currently. And to make a whole Unreal Engine game on my own, I'd have to bump those numbers up to something like an hour every day or so, and that is currently just not realistic for me either. So, I figured I'd get this off my chest. If you stuck around until now, thank you for listening. Feel free to comment and give this video a thumbs up, thumbs down, however you feel about it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.